My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old. Last night, I made braised short ribs, the recipe my mother-in-law taught me when I married her son, Mark. I packed them in the ceramic dish, wrapped it in a towel, and drove to his office in Midtown. The receptionist's face changed the moment she saw me. "Mrs. Stevens?" Her voice cracked. "Mark hasn't worked here in 6 weeks." I stood there holding that dish. Steam escaped from the edges. "He was let go," she said. Following an audit, the dish slipped from my hands. Short ribs and red wine sauce splashed across the marble lobby floor. People stopped walking, stared. I didn't cry. In my car, I opened my phone. A loan approval I'd ignored, $75,000 borrowed against our home. The retirement withdrawal notice hidden in my desk, $47,000 taken out. $122,000 gone. I typed his location into GPS. Queens, a diner I'd never heard of. I parked across the street. Rain drummed on the windshield. Through the window, I watched my husband, the architect who designed Manhattan high-rises, mop floors in a stained apron. A blonde woman walked up behind him, slapped his shoulder. He turned. That smile, the one he'd never given me in 10 years. "I'll do anything for you, Bella," I heard him say through the cracked window. His hand touched her face. That's when I understood. This wasn't sudden. Mark had chosen her a long time ago. I was just paying for it. I pulled out my phone, started recording. Then I called my lawyer. "Margaret, it's Claire Stevens. I need to freeze everything. Bank accounts, credit lines, all of it." Mark looked up, saw me through the window. Our eyes met across the rain. I didn't look away. "And Margaret," I said, "file fraud charges today. Before we go any further, please hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. If you give this a like, good luck is coming your way." The morning light hit the penthouse windows at exactly the angle Claire Stevens loved most, soft gold streaming across the Italian marble, turning everything it touched into something you'd see in a bridal magazine. She stood at the kitchen island with her second cup of coffee, mentally running through the Henderson Lou wedding timeline for the 14th time. Orchids at 7 a.m. String quartet soundcheck at 8:30. Bride's first look at 10. Everything had to be flawless. Everything always was. Claire was 38 years old, and she'd built her reputation one perfect wedding at a time. Stevens Events wasn't just a business, it was a promise. When Manhattan's elite wanted their "I do" to be unforgettable, they called her. She'd coordinated ceremonies in the Rose main wedding room, at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden in peak cherry blossom season, even once on a private yacht circling the Statue of Liberty at sunset. Her job was to make other people's dreams come true, and she was exceptional at it. The penthouse itself was a testament to that success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a kitchen most chefs would envy, furniture that cost more than some people's cars. She and Mark, her husband of 10 years, had moved in 3 years ago, and every morning she still felt a quiet thrill walking through rooms this beautiful. Mark Stevens was 40, a lead architect at Stevens & Associates, a firm his father had founded and Mark had expanded into something formidable. He specialized in luxury residential projects, the kind where clients asked for wine cellars and infinity pools and panic rooms. He was good at his work, methodical, detail-oriented, the same qualities that had drawn Claire to him when they'd met at a charity gala a decade ago. She glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. Mark was still in the shower, and she had exactly 13 minutes before she needed to leave for the flower market in the Bronx. The Henderson Lou bride had very specific ideas about peonies. Claire carried her coffee mug to her home office, a small room off the living room that she'd converted into command central for her business. Fabric swatches covered one wall. Vendor contracts filled a filing cabinet. Her desk was organized chaos, sample invitations, a binder of venue photos, 3 different notebooks for 3 different upcoming weddings, each color-coded and cross-referenced. She needed the Henderson contract. It should be in the top drawer, but when she pulled it open, She found it buried under a stack of old architectural magazines marked subscriptions that somehow always migrated into her space. She lifted them out, shaking her head. That's when she saw the envelope. It was cream-colored, official-looking, with a return address she didn't recognize at first. Then her eyes caught the words 401k early withdrawal penalty notice. Addressed to Mark Stevens. Claire set down her coffee mug. Her hand reached for the envelope before her brain fully processed what she was doing. It wasn't sealed, just tucked closed, the flap pressed down but not glued. She pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The numbers swam in front of her eyes. $47,000 withdrawn. Penalty $4,700. Tax liability estimated $14,100. The date of withdrawal 6 weeks ago. Her heart did something strange in her chest, not a skip, exactly, but a stutter. Like it forgot the rhythm for a second. She read the notice again. Then a third time. The paper felt too light in her hands, like it should weigh more for the kind of information it carried. $47,000. She heard the shower shut off down the hall. Mark would be out in minutes, dressing for work in one of his tailored suits, checking his phone while he knotted his tie. The same routine every morning. Claire slid the notice back into the envelope and placed it on top of the magazines. Then she picked up her coffee and walked to the kitchen, her mind moving in 3 directions at once. Maybe there was an explanation. A good one. Something perfectly reasonable that she just didn't understand because she didn't handle the retirement accounts. Mark managed their investments, she managed the business finances. That's how it had always worked. But $47,000. She was rinsing her mug when Mark walked into the kitchen, his hair still damp, wearing charcoal gray slacks and a crisp white shirt, tie draped around his neck, unknotted. He smiled at her, that easy, familiar smile she'd woken up to for a decade. "Morning," he said, heading straight for the coffee maker. "You're up early." "Flower market," Claire said. Her voice sounded normal. "Henderson Lou wedding on Saturday." "Right, the big one." Mark poured himself a cup, added 2 sugars the way he always did. "You'll make it perfect. You always do." She watched him move around the kitchen, so comfortable, so at ease. He reached into the fridge for the half and half, stirred it into his coffee with a spoon from the drawer. "Mark," she said. He glanced over. The words were right there. "I found a notice. About the 401k. What's going on?" But something stopped her. Maybe it was the morning light, still golden and perfect. Maybe it was the Henderson Lou timeline running through her head. Maybe it was just the fact that she didn't want to shatter this moment, this ordinary, peaceful morning, with a question that might change everything. "Nothing," she said. "Just have a good day." "You too." He walked over and kissed her forehead, tasting like coffee and mint toothpaste. Then he was grabbing his messenger bag from the hook by the door, checking his phone, slipping into his suit jacket. "Late tonight," he called over his shoulder. "Big presentation for the Riverside project. Probably won't be home until 9 or 10. "Okay," Claire said, and then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving her standing in the kitchen with questions she hadn't asked and answers she was afraid to hear. She went back to her office. The envelope was still there, sitting on top of the magazines like an accusation. $47,000, early withdrawal, penalty and taxes. Claire picked up her phone and opened her calendar. Henderson Lou final walkthrough at 2 p.m. Cake tasting with the Morrison couple at 4. She had a packed day. No time to sit here and spiral over a piece of paper that probably had a perfectly logical explanation. But she took a photo of the notice anyway, just in case. Then she grabbed her coat, her bag, her car keys, and headed out into the city, where the morning was bright and clean and full of promise, and tried very hard not to think about the cold feeling spreading through her chest like frost across a window. 3 days passed. Claire orchestrated the Henderson Lou wedding with her usual precision, every orchid in place, every champagne flute filled at exactly the right moment, the couple's first dance. Perfectly timed to catch the golden hour light through the venue's arched windows. The bride cried during the vows. The mother of the groom told Claire it was the most beautiful wedding she'd ever attended. Another success. Another five-figure check deposited into the Stevens Events account. But the notice haunted her. She didn't bring it up with Mark. Not on Thursday night when he came home at 10:30, smelling like scotch and claiming the Riverside presentation had gone long. Not on Friday morning when he left before she woke up, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter early site visit. Love you. Not even on Saturday evening, after the wedding, when they ordered Thai food and watched a movie on the couch, his arm around her shoulders, everything feeling so normal. She almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. But Sunday morning, the envelope arrived. Claire was at the mailboxes in the lobby when she saw it, a thin white envelope mixed in with the usual catalogs and credit card offers. The return address made her stomach drop. Medicare Customer Service Center. She took the elevator back up to the penthouse, her hands shaking slightly as she tore it open. Explanation of benefits. The header was in bold blue letters. Below it, a list of coverage details, premium amounts, effective dates. Her eyes scanned down to the note at the bottom, highlighted in yellow: premium coverage through Stevens & Associates has been terminated. Member is no longer employed by listed organization. Last day of coverage March 15, 2025. Claire read it 3 times. Then she walked to the kitchen island and spread the paper out on the marble surface, pressing her palms flat against the stone. The coldness of it helped somehow, like she needed something solid to hold onto. Mark wasn't employed by Stevens & Associates anymore. Since March 15. It was April 27. She stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably closer to 5 minutes, her mind trying to construct explanations that made sense. Maybe it was a mistake. Insurance companies made errors all the time. Maybe Mark had changed the policy and forgot to mention it. Maybe there was a merger, a restructuring, something administrative that he just hadn't gotten around to telling her about. But $47,000 from the 401k. And now this. She heard the bathroom door open. Mark walked out in his weekend clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, hair uncombed, phone already in his hand. Morning, he said, not looking up from the screen. Claire picked up the insurance notice. Her hand was steadier than she expected. Mark. Something in her voice made him glance over. Yeah? She held up the paper. Why is Medicare saying you're not covered by Stevens & Associates anymore? For just a second, less than a second, really, maybe half a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that easy smile, the one that had charmed her at charity galas and family dinners and 1,000 ordinary moments. Oh, that, he said, setting his phone down on the counter. It's a clerical error. The firm's going through a merger with Delaney and Partners, remember? I told you about it last month. They're switching all the benefits over to a new provider. And apparently someone at the old company jumped the gun and terminated everyone's coverage before the new stuff kicked in. He walked over to the coffee maker, completely relaxed, already moving on to the next thing. I've been calling them for 2 weeks trying to get it sorted out. Bureaucracy, you know how it is. Claire watched him pour coffee into his favorite mug, the one with the architectural blueprint pattern she'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago. A merger, she said. Yeah, big pain in the ass, honestly. New contracts, new systems, everything's a mess right now. He took a sip, leaned against the counter. Why? Are you worried about coverage? Because we're fine. The new policy takes effect retroactively once they process all the paperwork. It's annoying, but it's handled. His voice was so confident, so reassuring. The same tone he used when clients worried about timelines or budgets, calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who had everything under control. And the 401k withdrawal? The words came out before she could stop them. Another flicker. Faster this time. What about it? I found the penalty notice. In my desk drawer. Mark set down his coffee. You went through my mail? It was in my desk, Mark. Under your magazines. Right. He rubbed the back of his neck. Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that. $47,000. I know it sounds like a lot. It is a lot. Claire, He stepped closer, his expression shifting into something softer, more vulnerable. You remember how I told you Delaney and Partners wanted me to buy in as a named partner? To have real equity in the firm? She nodded slowly. Well, they need capital commitments from the new partners. It's standard for this kind of merger. Everyone has to have skin in the game, you know. And the 401k was the easiest place to pull from without disrupting our regular cash flow. He reached out and took her hand. I was going to tell you. I know how you get about money, and I didn't want you to worry. It's an investment in our future. In a year, maybe two, we'll have doubled it back. Claire looked down at their joined hands. His thumb was stroking the back of hers, the gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. Why didn't you just tell me? Because I'm an idiot, he said, and laughed a self-deprecating sound that usually made her smile. Because I thought I could handle it all and present you with a done deal, like, hey honey, guess what? I'm a named partner now. I wanted it to be a surprise. A good one. The explanation sat between them like a third person in the room. It made sense. Sort of. The merger explained the insurance. The partnership buy-in explained the 401k. Mark had always been ambitious, always thinking 5 steps ahead. And he was right. She did worry about money, about financial stability, about making sure they had enough cushion for the unpredictable. You should have told me, she said quietly. I know. You're right. I'm sorry. He squeezed her hand. No more secrets, okay? I'll show you all the partnership paperwork tonight. You can go through every line if you want. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. Okay, she said. Mark pulled her into a hug, and she let herself fold into it, her cheek against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong. I've got to run, he said after a moment, kissing the top of her head. Site visit in Brooklyn. Should be back by 3, 4 at the latest. On a Sunday? Crazy deadline. You know how it is. He was already grabbing his keys from the hook, his phone, his wallet. But tonight, I'm all yours. We'll order in, I'll show you the documents, and you can interrogate me about every line item. He grinned, winked, and then he was out the door. Claire stood in the kitchen, the insurance notice still in her hand, the marble island cold under her other palm. The apartment felt too quiet. She walked back to the mailboxes and checked again, even though she'd just been down there 20 minutes ago. Nothing new. Then she went to her office and sat down at her desk, opening her laptop. She typed Stevens & Associates merger Delaney Partners into Google. 7 results, none of them about Mark's firm. She tried Stevens Associates architecture firm New York merger. Still nothing. Her chest felt tight. She closed the laptop and stared at the wall covered in fabric swatches, at the careful organization of her work life, at the calendar filled with other people's perfect days. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the merger just wasn't public yet. Maybe Mark was telling the truth and she was inventing problems where none existed. But that night, when Mark came home at 9:30 instead of 3, smelling like fried food and cheap beer and claiming the site visit had run long, Claire didn't interrogate him. She didn't ask to see the partnership documents. She just smiled and said she was tired, and went to bed early, and lay in the dark, listening to him shower, wondering when exactly she'd started being afraid of the answers to her own questions. 2 weeks crawled by like months. Claire went through the motions coordinating the Morrison anniversary vow renewal, finalizing details for the Chen Rodriguez fusion ceremony, responding to inquiry emails from potential clients. But every night, after Mark came home late with another excuse, she sat in her office and searched. She found nothing about a merger, nothing about Delaney and Partners acquiring Stevens & Associates. The firm's website still looked exactly the same staff photos, same project portfolio, same contact us page listing Mark as lead architect. On a Wednesday morning in mid-May, Claire made a decision. She spent an hour in the kitchen, preparing Mark's favorite meal, braised short ribs with roasted root vegetables and a red wine reduction. She'd learned the recipe from his mother years ago, Back when they were newlyweds and she was trying to impress her in-laws. It took time searing the meat, building the braising liquid, letting everything cook low and slow until the meat fell off the bone. The kind of meal you made when you wanted someone to know you cared. She packed it carefully in a ceramic dish with a lid, wrapped the whole thing in a kitchen towel to keep it warm. Then she drove into Manhattan, her GPS guiding her to the address she'd memorized from Mark's business cards. Stevens and Associates, 47th Street, Midtown. The building was one of those glass and steel towers that dominated Midtown, all reflective surfaces and sharp angles. Claire had been here before, years ago, for the firm's holiday party. She remembered the sleek lobby, the modern art installations, the way Mark had introduced her to his colleagues with obvious pride. She parked in a garage 2 blocks away and walked, carrying the dish in both hands. The May air was warm, the sidewalks crowded with lunch-hour foot traffic. She felt strangely calm, like she was moving through someone else's life, watching herself from a distance. The lobby was exactly as she remembered: marble floors, a curved reception desk, walls lined with architectural renderings from the firm's most prestigious projects. A young woman sat behind the desk, blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, typing something on her computer. Claire approached with what she hoped was a confident smile. "Hi," she said. "I'm here to see Mark Stevens. I'm his wife. I brought him lunch." The receptionist looked up. For a second, her expression was professionally neutral. Then something shifted. Her eyes widened slightly, her mouth opened as if to speak, then closed again. She glanced down at her computer screen, then back at Claire. "Mrs. Stevens," she said quietly. That tone. Claire knew that tone. She'd heard it at funerals, at hospital waiting rooms, in the voices of people delivering news they wished they didn't have to deliver. "Is something wrong?" Claire asked. The ceramic dish suddenly felt very heavy in her hands. The receptionist stood up. Could you come around here for a second?" Away from the door? Claire's heart was doing that stuttering thing again. She walked around the desk, following the woman to a small alcove near the elevators, out of sight from the main entrance. "Mrs. Stevens," the receptionist said again, and now her voice was filled with something that looked uncomfortably like pity. "Mark hasn't worked here in 6 weeks." The words didn't make sense at first. They were English. Claire understood each individual word, but strung together like that they formed something incomprehensible. "What?" "He was let go, following an internal audit." The woman's eyes were kind, which somehow made it worse. "I'm so sorry. I thought I assumed you knew." Claire's hands started to shake. She gripped the dish tighter, feeling the heat of it through the towel. "An audit," she repeated. There were some irregularities with expense reports, travel reimbursements that didn't match up with actual projects. The partners confronted him about it in early April, and he was terminated shortly after. The receptionist glanced toward the main lobby, then back at Claire. "He told the senior partners he was taking a leave for family reasons, but that's not what happened." The lobby tilted. Claire put one hand against the wall to steady herself. "Where is he?" Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from underwater. "I don't know, Mrs. Stevens. I'm so sorry." Claire looked down at the ceramic dish in her hands. Short ribs, braised for hours, made with love and care, and the desperate hope that maybe there was still a reasonable explanation for all of this. She saw her own reflection in the polished elevator doors, a woman in a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants, carrying a homemade meal for a husband who didn't exist. A woman who planned perfect futures for strangers while her own life crumbled into lies. "Mrs. Stevens?" The receptionist touched her arm gently. "Are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" "No," Claire said. "No, I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. But what else was there to say? "He said family reasons," Claire heard herself say. What did he tell people, exactly? The receptionist hesitated. "He said there was a family crisis. That he needed time to deal with personal matters. He was very vague about it." A family crisis. Personal matters. Claire's mind was moving in 100 directions at once, trying to piece together a timeline. Terminated in early April. The 401k withdrawal was dated mid-March. The insurance termination was March 15. Everything had been falling apart for months, and she'd been completely, utterly blind to it. "Thank you," Claire managed, "for telling me. I'm so sorry," the receptionist said again. "If there's anything." But Claire was already walking away, moving on autopilot toward the elevator, then changing course toward the stairs. Needing to move, needing air, needing to be anywhere but this building where her husband's career had imploded and no one had thought to tell his wife. She made it to the lobby and through the glass doors before her hands gave out. The ceramic dish slipped from her grip and shattered on the sidewalk. Short ribs and vegetables and red wine sauce splashing across the concrete in a grotesque parody of a crime scene. People stopped and stared. Someone asked if she was all right. Claire just stood there, looking at the broken pieces, at the meal. She'd spent hours making for a man who'd been lying to her face every single day for 6 weeks. Maybe longer. Maybe their entire marriage. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Mark working late again tonight. "Don't wait up. Love you." Claire stared at the message. Then she looked at the broken dish, the ruined meal, the curious faces of strangers walking past. She took a photo of the text. Then she took a photo of the broken dish on the sidewalk. Evidence. She was collecting evidence now, even though she didn't yet know what she was building a case for. A businessman in a suit stopped beside her. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need help?" "No," Claire said. Her voice was steady now, cold and clear. "I'm fine. Just clumsy." She stepped over the mess and started walking. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. She just walked, block after block, while her mind spun through every lie, every late night, every "I love you" that Mark had said with such convincing sincerity. Her phone rang. Mark's name on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. She declined the call. "A text, Claire? You okay? The office receptionist just called me. Said you were here? What's going on?" So he knew. Of course he knew. The receptionist must have called to warn him. To tell him his wife had shown up with lunch and learned the truth he'd been hiding. Claire typed back, "Where are you?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. At a site inspection in Queens. Why? What happened? Queens. Something about that word snagged in her brain. She stopped walking and pulled up her email, scrolling back through months of messages from Mark. There a forwarded document from 2 weeks ago, something about a HELOC approval. Home equity line of credit. She'd glanced at it briefly, assumed it was junk mail, deleted it. But she could retrieve deleted emails. Claire stood on a street corner in Midtown, surrounded by lunch hour crowds, and dug through her digital trash until she found it. The email was from their bank, confirming approval for a $75,000 line of credit against their penthouse. She called the bank, waited through the automated menu, finally got a human being on the line. "Yes, I'm calling about a HELOC that was recently approved on my property," she said, giving the account number, her social security number, every piece of identifying information they asked for. "One moment, Mrs. Stevens." Typing sounds. "Yes, I see the account here. Approved on April 10th. First withdrawal was processed on April 12th. How much was withdrawn?" The initial withdrawal was $50,000. There have been 2 additional withdrawals since then, totaling another $15,000. Your current available credit is $10,000. $65,000. Borrowed against the home they own together, without her knowledge, without her signature or with a forged version of it. "Can you tell me where the funds were sent?" Claire asked. Her voice sounded like someone else's, calm, professional, detached. "I'm sorry, I can only confirm they were transferred to an external account. For specific routing information, you'd need to speak with Mr. Stevens, as he was the primary applicant. Even though I'm on the deed?" A pause. "Mrs. Stevens, is there a problem with this account?" "No," Claire said. "Thank you for your help." She hung up and stood there, people flowing around her like water around a stone. $65,000 from the HELOC, $47,000 from the 401k, over $100,000, gone in less than 2 months. Her phone buzzed. Mark again. Claire, you're scaring me. Please call me back. She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she opened her GPS and typed in an address, the one listed on the HELOC approval papers, an address in Queens she didn't recognize but that clearly meant something to her husband. It was 1:47 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Claire Stevens had a cake tasting at 330 and a venue walkthrough at 5. She was going to miss both. She hailed a cab and gave the driver the Queens address, watching Manhattan disappear behind her as they crossed the bridge into a part of the city she rarely visited, all chain-link fences and auto repair shops, and the kind of neighborhoods where the American dream came to die quietly, without witnesses. The address led to a street that looked like time had forgotten it existed. Cracked pavement, buildings with faded paint, a laundromat with half its letters missing from the sign. The cab driver gave Claire a questioning look when she asked him to stop. "You sure this is the right place?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though she wasn't sure of anything anymore. She paid him and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air smelled different here, grease and exhaust and something vaguely sweet, like garbage left out too long in the sun. This was not the New York of penthouse apartments and six-figure weddings. This was the New York most people tried very hard not to see. The building in front of her was a diner. Or it had been, once. The sign above the door read Ella's Diner in letters that might have been cheerful 30 years ago but now just looked tired. Through the grimy windows, she could see a handful of customers inside, the kind of place where coffee came in. Chipped mugs, and the menu hadn't changed since 1987. Claire's phone buzzed. "Mark, where are you? Please talk to me." She silenced it and walked closer to the window. That's when she saw him. Mark Stevens, her husband, the man who'd kissed her forehead this morning and told her he loved her, was standing behind the counter wearing a stained apron. Not visiting, not meeting a client, actually working. His hair was tucked under a baseball cap. His hands were covered in what looked like burger grease, and he was flipping something on a griddle while another man, older, gray-haired, barked orders at him from the kitchen window. Claire's legs stopped working. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching through the window like she was observing someone else's husband, someone else's life falling apart. Mark wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of grease across his temple. He looked exhausted, defeated, nothing like the confident architect who'd left their penthouse that morning in designer slacks and Italian loafers. A woman emerged from the back 40s, bottle blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. She walked up behind Mark and slapped his shoulder hard enough that he flinched. "Table 4's been waiting 10 minutes for that burger," she snapped. "What are you doing? Taking a nap?" "Sorry, Bella," Mark said. His voice was muffled through the window, but Claire could hear the tone, apologetic, submissive, nothing like the way he spoke to her, or to anyone else she'd ever seen him interact with. Bella. The name hit Claire like a physical blow. She'd heard that name before. Years ago, when they were dating, Mark had mentioned a high school girlfriend named Bella. First love, the one that got away. He'd brought her up exactly once, during a late-night conversation about past relationships, and when Claire had asked follow-up questions. He'd gotten quiet and changed the subject. She'd forgotten about it, filed it away as irrelevant history. But here was Bella, very much present, very much in charge. And Mark was following her orders like a dog who'd been kicked too many times to remember how to bite back. "And mop up that spill by the bathroom," Bella added, not even looking at him. "Before someone slips and sues us." "Yes, ma'am," Mark said. "Ma'am." He called her ma'am. Claire watched him set down the spatula, grab a mop from a corner, and start cleaning up what looked like spilled coffee near the bathroom hallway. His movements were mechanical, practiced. This wasn't his first day doing this. He'd been here before, many times. The sky chose that moment to open up. Rain, sudden and cold. The kind of spring storm that comes out of nowhere and soaks you to the bone in seconds. Claire barely felt it. She just stood there, water streaming down her face, watching her husband mop floors in a failing diner in Queens while a woman she'd never met treated him like hired help. How long had this been going on? The question echoed in her skull. How long? 6 weeks, since he was fired? Longer? Had he been living this double life for months, years? Slipping away to this place while she planned weddings and believed every lie he told? Inside, Bella said something that made Mark laugh, a hollow, desperate sound Claire had never heard from him before. Then Bella walked away, and Mark went back to mopping, his shoulders hunched, his whole body language screaming resignation. Claire pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to open the camera. She took photos: Mark in the apron, Mark mopping, the diner's exterior, everything. Evidence. She was drowning in evidence now, so much of it she could barely breathe. A customer inside stood up and waved Mark over. An older woman, probably 70, with a complaint about her eggs. Claire watched Mark nod and apologize and hurry back to the kitchen. Watched him scrape the eggs onto a plate and bring them back out. Watched the woman examine them critically before nodding approval. This was what he'd been doing while claiming to work late at a firm that had fired him 6 weeks ago. This was where the HELOC money was going, into this place, this woman, this life he'd apparently chosen over the one they'd built together. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Mark. No, you found out. I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I can explain everything. Could he possibly explain this in a way that made sense, that didn't shatter the last 10 years into fragments? She'd never be able to piece back together? She didn't respond. She just stood in the rain, watching through the window as her husband lived a life she'd never imagined. Existed, and felt something inside her chest turn to stone. Another text: I love you, Claire. I never meant for any of this to happen. Love. The word looked foreign now, like it was written in a language she used to speak but had somehow forgotten. She took one more photo, this one of Mark looking directly at Bella with an expression Claire had never seen on his face before. Devotion. Desperate, hungry devotion. The way people looked at things they'd do anything to keep. He'd never looked at Claire that way. Not once in 10 years. The realization hit her like a truck. She'd spent a decade with a man who was in love with someone else. Someone he'd known before Claire existed. Someone who'd apparently had such a hold on him that he'd destroy his career, drain their savings, and mortgage their future just to be near her. Claire turned away from the window. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the street into a river of gray water and trash. She started walking, not sure where she was going, just needing to move, to put distance between herself and the image of Mark in that stained apron, calling another woman ma'am. Her phone rang, Mark's name flashing on the screen. She answered this time. Claire. His voice was panicked, breathless. Claire, where are you? Are you safe? Please talk to me. I'm standing outside Bella's diner, Claire said. Her voice was calm, flat, like she was reading from a script. I can see you right now. Through the window, mopping the floor. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Claire, how long? She asked. How long what? Don't. The word came out sharp, cutting. Don't lie to me anymore. How long have you been doing this? She heard him breathing, heard what sounded like a door opening and closing, heard the background noise of the diner fade away. He'd gone outside, or to a back room, somewhere he could talk without Bella hearing. Since March, he said finally. Since I lost the job. Because of her. It's complicated. You withdrew $47,000 from our retirement. You mortgaged our home for $65,000 more. You've been pretending to go to work every day while actually flipping burgers for your high school girlfriend. Claire's voice was still calm, still flat, even as her entire world dissolved around her. What part of that is complicated? She needed help, Mark said. The diner was failing. She had debts. She was going to lose everything. So you gave her our everything instead. I was going to pay it all back. I had a plan. There's a real estate deal that Bella's working on with some investors. If it goes through, we'll triple the money back and I can fix all of this." "Stop." Claire closed her eyes. The rain was cold enough to hurt now. "Just stop. Claire, please. I love you. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can fix this. I can fix this. Just give me a chance to." "Were you ever really fired? Or was that a lie too?" A pause. "The audit was real. I was taking money from project accounts to help Bella. They found out. But Claire, I did it for us, for our future." "You did it for her," Claire said. "Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." She heard him make a sound like a sob. "Please, please don't give up on me. On us." Claire opened her eyes and looked at the diner one more time. Through the window, she could see Bella laughing with a customer, completely at ease in her shabby little kingdom. While the man Claire had married worked in the background like a ghost. "There is no S," Claire said. "There hasn't been for a long time. I was just too stupid to see it." "Claire." She hung up. Then she blocked his number, turned off her phone, and hailed another cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. Claire gave him her address. The penthouse. The perfect apartment with its perfect views and perfect furniture. All of it built on perfect lies. She sat in the back of the cab, soaked through and shivering, and watched Queens disappear behind her. Somewhere in her purse, her phone was buzzing. Mark calling from the diner's line, probably, or Bella's phone, desperate to reach her. She didn't care. She was done being reachable. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay, miss?" "No," Claire said, "but I will be." She didn't know if that was true, but she said it anyway, like a promise to herself, like a vow more binding than the wedding vows that had brought her to this moment. Outside the cab windows, the city blurred past, all those lives happening simultaneously. All those people living their own versions of joy and heartbreak and the complicated mess in between. Claire Stevens was 38 years old. She'd spent the last decade building other people's happy endings. Now it was time to figure out what her own ending looked like. Friends, what a journey we've been on with Claire so far. She thought she had it all figured out: the perfect marriage, the beautiful penthouse, a husband she'd trusted for 10 years. Until a single piece of paper started unraveling everything she believed. Now she knows the truth. Mark wasn't just fired from his job, he was embezzling money to fund his first love's failing diner. He wasn't working late on projects, he was mopping floors and flipping burgers for a woman named Bella while Claire planned dream weddings for strangers. But here's what Mark doesn't know yet. Here's what he's about to learn the hard way. Claire Stevens doesn't just plan perfect events. She's a woman who understands details, who knows how to build a case, who spent years coordinating complex operations down to the last second. And she's about to bring all of that skill to bear on the man who thought he could have two lives at once. Stay with us, because what comes next? Mark's going to wish he'd just told her the truth. Claire sat in the penthouse that night, still in her wet clothes, and let her mind drift backward. The wedding. Their wedding, 10 years ago. Street, Patrick's Cathedral, because Mark had wanted something grand, something that would make a statement. Claire had worn her grandmother's pearls and a dress she'd saved for 2 years to afford. She'd walked down that aisle thinking she was the luckiest woman alive. But there had been a woman at the back of the church. Claire remembered her now, remembered glancing back during the vows and seeing her, this blonde woman in a dark coat, standing in the very last pew. She'd been crying, not happy tears, not the kind guests shed at weddings. Real, wrenching sobs that she was trying desperately to muffle. Claire had asked Mark about it at the reception. "Did you see that woman? In the back?" She looked so upset. He'd laughed it off. Probably just emotional. You know how weddings are. They make everyone cry. But he'd changed the subject quickly, pulled her onto the dance floor before she could ask anything else. That woman had been Bella. She must have been watching the man she'd loved in high school marry someone else, crying in the back row while Claire said, "I do," to a future that was already built on shifting sand. Other memories surfaced now, sharp and clear. The Ring camera, their smart home security system that Mark had insisted they installed 2 years ago for safety. Claire had loved it, loved being able to check who was at the door when she was out at events, loved the peace of mind it brought. Except every Saturday morning, without fail, Mark turned it off. Privacy, he'd said when she'd asked about it. I don't like being recorded in my own home on the weekends. And she'd accepted that, because it seemed reasonable, because she trusted him. But those were the mornings he'd said he was going to the gym, or to an early coffee with a colleague, or to Home Depot for some project around the apartment. Saturday mornings that stretched into Saturday afternoons. Always back by dinner, always with some mundane explanation. He'd been going to Queens. To Bella. For how long? Months? Years? Claire pulled out her laptop and logged into their Ring account. The footage didn't go back more than 60 days unless you paid for extended storage, which they hadn't. But 60 days was enough. She started scrolling backward through Saturdays. March 29th camera disabled at 6:47 a.m. Re-enabled at 4:23 p.m. March 22nd camera disabled at 6:52 a.m. Re-enabled at 5:01 p.m. March 15th camera disabled at 7:03 a.m. Re-enabled at 3:45 p.m. On and on, every single Saturday, the same pattern. 9, 10 hours gone. Hours he'd spent with Bella while Claire worked on event proposals and vendor contracts and believed every word he said. She found an old voicemail on her phone. Mark's voice, soft and loving. Hey, it's me. Just wanted to say I'm thinking about you. You worked so hard, Claire. You deserve everything good in this world. I love you. When had he sent that? She checked the date. March 10th, a Tuesday. The same week he'd been fired from Stevens & Associates for embezzling funds to support his ex-girlfriend's business. He'd told her he loved her while actively destroying their life together. The rage that filled her then was unlike anything she'd ever felt. It was cold, surgical. The kind of anger that doesn't scream or throw things. The kind that plans. Claire went to the filing cabinet in her office and pulled out every financial document they had. Tax returns, bank statements, investment portfolios, the deed to the penthouse, their marriage license, signed and notarized 10 years ago. She spread them all out on the dining room table and started making lists. What they owned, what they owed, what Mark had stolen, what she could prove. At 2 a.m., she called a locksmith. I need the locks changed on my apartment. Tomorrow morning. First thing. At 3 a.m., she emailed her lawyer. Family emergency. Need to meet ASAP. Urgent. At 4 a.m., she finally changed out of her wet clothes, took a shower, and stood under the hot water until she couldn't cry anymore. By the time the sun came up over Central Park, Claire had a plan. Mark had built his whole deception on the assumption that she was too trusting, too focused on her business, too in love to see what was right in front of her face. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been. The next morning, Claire met with Margaret Chen, a forensic accountant whose card she'd saved from a networking event 2 years ago. Margaret's office was in a nondescript building in the financial district, the kind of place where divorces were dissected and hidden assets were dragged into the light. Tell me everything, Margaret said, setting up her laptop and a legal pad. Claire did. The 401k withdrawal. The HELOC. The forged signatures or what had to be forged signatures, because Claire had never agreed to mortgage their home. The diner in Queens. Bella. Mark's termination from Stevens & Associates. Margaret took notes, her expression neutral but her pen moving fast. Okay, she said when Claire finished. First things first. We need to freeze everything. Bank accounts, credit lines, anything he can access. If he's been this reckless already, he'll drain whatever's left the second he realizes you're onto him. How do we do that? You file for a temporary restraining order on the assets. It's standard in divorce proceedings where there's financial fraud. We present evidence to a judge. They freeze the accounts until the case is resolved. Margaret flipped through her notes. You said you have the HELOC paperwork? Yes. And you never signed it? Never even saw it until yesterday. Then that's forgery. That's a crime, not just a civil matter. Margaret's eyes sharpened. Claire, if we pursue this the right way, Mark could face criminal charges. Are you prepared for that? Was she? Claire thought about Mark in that apron, thought about Bella slapping his shoulder, thought about 10 years of I love yous that meant nothing. Yes, she said. Good, because we're going to need to prove intent. We need to show he knowingly defrauded you, that this wasn't just poor financial management. Margaret opened her laptop. Let's start with his digital footprint. Do you have access to any of his devices? His laptop. He left it at home this morning. Perfect. We need transaction records, emails, text messages, anything that shows communication with Bella, anything about money transfers. Margaret pulled up a form on her screen. I'm also going to recommend we hire a private investigator. If Mark's been lying about this, there might be other things. Other accounts, other properties. We need to know everything. Claire felt a twist of something in her chest. Not quite pain, more like the sensation of a wound being cleaned out before it could heal properly. Do it, she said. All of it. Over the next week, Claire became a woman she barely recognized. She went through Mark's laptop with Margaret's guidance, finding emails between Mark and Bella dating back 3 years. Not romantic, exactly, but desperate. Bella asking for money, Mark promising to help, Bella complaining about the diner, about her gambling debts, about how unfair life had been to her. Mark reassuring her, over and over, that he'd take care of it. I'll do anything for you, Bella, one email read. You know that. You've always known that. That email was dated 2 years before Mark's termination. Before the 401k withdrawal. Before any of this had exploded into the open. He'd been planning this for years. The private investigator Margaret hired was named Sarah Miller, a former NYPD detective who now specialized in domestic cases. She was 45, sharp-eyed, and had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made Claire feel, for the first time in weeks, like someone was actually on her side. Your husband's not very good at covering his tracks, Sarah said during their first meeting, sliding a folder across the table. His smartwatch syncs to a cloud account. GPS data shows he's been in Queens almost every day since late March. Sleep patterns show he's been staying overnight there at least twice a week. Claire opened the folder. Maps with pinpoint locations, all clustered around Bella's diner. Time stamps, dates. There's more, Sarah continued. I ran a background check on Bella Thorne. She's got a gambling problem, serious one. Owes money to at least 3 different bookies. The diner's been in the red for 4 years straight. She's been using it to launder money, paying herself and a few Shell employees inflated salaries to hide her debts. And Mark knew about this? More than knew. He's one of the Shell employees. Sarah pulled out another document, payroll stubs with Mark's name on them, showing he'd been paid $3,500 a month for consulting services since January. Consulting services, while working minimum wage behind the counter, cleaning floors, serving eggs to senior citizens. The IRS is going to have a field day with this, Sarah said. But that's not even the most interesting part. She pulled out one more document. A mortgage application for a property in Queens, a small house 2 blocks from the diner. Applicant Mark Stevens, co-applicant Bella Thorne. He tried to buy her a house? Claire heard her own voice from very far away. Tried being the key word. The application was rejected, insufficient income, ironically enough. But he submitted it with forged financial statements claiming he still worked at Stevens & Associates. Sarah tapped the document. That's federal fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, the works. Claire stared at the application, at Mark's signature, at the address of a future he'd apparently been building with someone else while still sleeping in the bed they shared. I want everything, Claire said quietly. Every illegal thing he's done. Every lie. I want it documented, filed, and submitted to whoever needs to see it. Margaret and Sarah exchanged a look. Claire, Margaret said gently, if we go that route, Mark will likely face jail time. Are you good? Claire cut her off. He should. She meant it. The man she'd married wouldn't have done any of this. But that man had never existed. He'd been a story Mark told her, a performance he put on every morning and evening. While his real life happened in a diner in Queens with a woman who treated him like property, and somehow that was exactly what he wanted. 2 weeks after the meeting, Claire had everything she needed. Bank records showing systematic theft, forged documents, email trails proving premeditation, GPS data tracking his movements, photographs from Sarah of Mark entering and leaving the diner, of him standing outside, smoking cigarettes with Bella, of the two of them sitting in a car together at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, her head on his shoulder. On a Thursday morning in early June, Claire's lawyer filed for divorce. On that same Thursday, at the same time, he filed criminal fraud charges with the district attorney's office. Mark called her 73 times that day. She didn't answer once. The confrontation happened on a Monday. Claire had Sarah drive her to the diner. She'd chosen 10 a.m. specifically late enough that the breakfast rush would be over, early enough that Mark would definitely be there. She was wearing one of her business suits, the navy one she saved for meetings with difficult clients. Armor. She walked through the door of Bella's diner with Sarah behind her and a manila envelope in her hands. Mark was wiping down tables. He looked up, saw her, and the color drained from his face so fast Claire thought he might pass out. Claire, he started. Mark Stevens? The process server stepped forward. A woman Claire's lawyer had arranged to be there, official and impartial. You've been served. She handed him the envelope. Divorce petition. Fraud lawsuit. A temporary restraining order freezing all their joint accounts and preventing him from accessing any shared assets. Mark's hands shook as he took the papers. Bella emerged from the back, took one look at the scene, and her face twisted. What the hell is this? Who are you people? I'm his wife, Claire said. Her voice was steady, calm. Or I was. And you must be the reason my marriage is over. Listen, lady, Bella started. Bella Thorne? Another process server, another envelope. You've also been served. Co-defendant in a fraud case involving forged financial documents and illegal paystub generation. Bella snatched the papers, her eyes scanning them quickly. This is bullshit. I didn't do anything. You accepted money you knew was stolen, Claire said. You employed someone you knew was using forged documents. That makes you an accomplice. The handful of customers in the diner were watching now, this drama playing out better than anything on their phones. Mark finally found his voice. Claire, please, can we just talk about this? Privately? No. She turned to him fully, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. You had 10 years to talk to me. You chose to lie instead. I made mistakes. You committed crimes, Claire corrected. Multiple felonies, actually. The district attorney's office has all the documentation. Forgery, fraud, embezzlement. They're very interested in talking to you. His face went gray. You called the DA? Did you think I wouldn't? Did you think I'd just let you steal everything we built together and hand it to her? Claire gestured at Bella, who was still reading through the lawsuit, her expression morphing from anger to fear. This is insane, Bella said, but her voice had lost its edge. Mark, tell her. Tell me what? Claire asked. That you're not a gambling addict using a failing diner to hide your debts? That you didn't convince my husband to drain our retirement and mortgage our home to fund your mess? Because I have documentation proving otherwise. Lots of it. Bella's mouth opened and closed. For once, she had nothing to say. Claire turned back to Mark. You know what the saddest part is? You could have just left. You could have asked for a divorce, told me you wanted to be with her, and walked away like an adult. We would have split everything 50-50 and moved on with our lives. I never meant to hurt you. But you did this instead. You lied. You stole. You forged my signature. You made me look like a fool. Her voice finally cracked, just a little. You made me believe you loved me while you were building a whole other life behind my back. Mark's eyes filled with tears. I do love you. No, Claire said. You don't. You never did. You love her. You've always loved her. I was just convenient. Someone stable to come home to while you played out your high school fantasy whenever you could slip away. That's not. The judge today said out loud what my heart had been screaming in silence for weeks, Claire continued. She'd practiced this line, wanted to get it exactly right. He granted every single one of my requests. Restraining order on the assets. Immediate separation of finances. Full forensic audit of every penny you've touched in the last 5 years. She pulled one more document from her bag, the final one. And this is a notice from the bank. They're seizing the diner. Turns out when you use illegal pay stubs to prop up a failing business, they can call in the loan early. You've got 30 days to vacate. Bella made a sound like she'd been punched. You can't do that. I didn't do anything, Claire said. You did. Both of you. You committed fraud, and now you're facing the consequences. She looked at Mark one last time. He was crying openly now, his whole body shaking. I'm sorry, he choked out. Claire, I'm so sorry. I know, she said. And she meant it. She could see he was sorry he'd been caught. Sorry his perfect double life had imploded, sorry he was going to lose everything. But he wasn't sorry enough. Not for what mattered. Goodbye, Mark, Claire said. She walked out of the diner, Sarah following close behind. Through the window, she could see Mark collapse into a chair, his head in his hands. Bella was screaming at him, waving the legal papers, her face red with fury and fear. Claire got into Sarah's car and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. You okay? Sarah asked gently. No, Claire said, but I will be. It was the truth. She wasn't okay. Her marriage was over. Her savings were gone. The life she'd built had turned out to be constructed on lies so deep she still didn't know where they ended. But she'd fought back. She'd documented everything, built her case, and brought the truth into the light. For once, the paperwork protected me instead of erasing me, she thought. Sarah started the car, and they drove away from Queens, away from the diner and the wreckage of Mark's choices, back toward Manhattan and whatever came next. In her pocket, Claire's phone buzzed. A text from her lawyer judge signed off on everything. It's done. You're free. Free. The word felt strange, fragile, like something she wasn't quite sure she deserved yet. But she was going to learn. 6 months later, Claire stood in the living room of her new apartment, a bright, modest loft in Brooklyn with exposed brick and windows that looked out onto a tree-lined street. It was 1/3 the size of the penthouse, and she loved every square foot of it. The furniture was second-hand, bought from estate sales and refurbished with her own hands. The kitchen was small but functional. There was no marble, no designer lighting, no view of Central Park. Just honest space that was entirely, completely hers. She'd sold the penthouse in August. The proceeds had gone toward paying off the HELOC, covering legal fees, and building a cushion for the new business she was starting, Stevens Financial Recovery Services, a consultancy for women navigating financial abuse, helping them document, freeze assets, and build cases against partners who thought they could steal with impunity. Her first client had been a woman named Jennifer, whose husband had taken out credit cards in her name and maxed them all out on his gambling addiction. Claire had helped her file police reports, freeze her credit, and divorce him with her assets protected. Her second client was Maria, whose live-in boyfriend had convinced her to put his name on her house, then immediately taken out a reverse mortgage and disappeared. Claire had helped her unwind it, get him arrested, and keep her home. There were others now, a small but growing list of women who'd been where Claire had been, who needed someone who understood both the emotional devastation and the practical steps to survival. Claire had found her calling in the wreckage of her marriage. Mark was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility for fraud and forgery. Bella had lost the diner and declared bankruptcy. The house of cards they'd built together had collapsed exactly the way everyone had warned them it would, and Claire felt nothing when she heard the news. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a quiet sense that the universe had corrected an imbalance. On a crisp October afternoon, Claire walked through Central Park. Not the penthouse side, where tourists gathered and proposals happened under the Bow Bridge. The Brooklyn side, where locals walked their dogs and kids played soccer on the lawns. Her phone rang. A new client inquiry. She answered professionally, scheduled a consultation, made notes in her planner. When she hung up, she realized she was smiling. Really smiling, not the practiced expression she'd worn for so many years while planning other people's happiness. At 38, she'd learned that starting over wasn't failure. It was freedom. She stopped at a bench and sat down, watching the leaves fall in their slow autumn dance. Her divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. The judge had awarded her a significant portion of what Mark had stolen, not all of it, but enough. Enough to start fresh, enough to build something real. In her bag, her phone buzzed with a reminder. She pulled it out and saw the notification: final decree available for pickup. The actual document, signed and sealed. Legal proof that Mark Stevens was no longer her husband, no longer her responsibility, no longer anything to her. Except a chapter in a book she'd finally closed. Claire walked to the courthouse on her lunch break the next day. The clerk handed her the folder, cream-colored, official, surprisingly thin for something that represented the end of a decade. She signed the receipt with her legal name, Claire Marie Stevens. Soon she'd go back to her maiden name, Morrison, but for now, this signature was enough. She carried the folder outside and stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the city. Somewhere in this sprawling, chaotic, beautiful mess, Mark was in prison. Bella was starting over in some other borough. Their story was over, and Claire's was just beginning. She opened the folder one last time, just to see it. The decree. The final line: marriage dissolved. Parties restored to single status. Single. The word didn't scare her anymore. She walked back to her office, a small space she rented above a coffee shop. Just her and a desk and a laptop and a mission. On her desk was a photo of her mother, who died when Claire was 22, long before she'd met Mark. Sometimes Claire wondered what her mother would think of all this. Would she be disappointed? Sad? No. She'd be proud. Proud that Claire had fought back, that she hadn't let herself be erased by someone else's betrayal. That evening, Claire cooked dinner in her small Brooklyn kitchen, nothing fancy, just pasta and a simple tomato sauce. She ate at her second-hand dining table, reading through case notes for tomorrow's client meeting. The autumn light streamed through her windows, turning everything golden. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, the private investigator who'd become a friend. How are you holding up? Claire typed back, good, really good, and she meant it. She cleaned up the dishes, made herself tea, and settled onto her couch with a book. Outside her windows, Brooklyn hummed with life: neighbors coming home from work, kids laughing on the sidewalk, the distant rumble of the subway. This was her life now. Small, honest, real. No marble countertops or designer furniture or Instagram-perfect views. Just her, learning how to be alone, learning how to trust herself again. Learning that the person she'd been before Mark, the person who'd believed in love and futures and promises, hadn't been stupid. She'd just chosen poorly, and now she was choosing better. At 38, Claire had discovered that the best wedding she could plan was the one between herself and the truth. No illusions. No performances, just the messy, complicated, beautiful work of building a life that was actually hers. She pulled out her journal, a new habit she'd picked up in therapy, and wrote for the first time in years. I signed my own name and it actually felt like mine. She underlined the last 3 words. Like mine. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, and Claire sat in her small apartment, drinking tea and planning tomorrow, and felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. Peace. Friends, how did you find today's story? Claire Stevens thought she had everything figured out: the perfect marriage, the successful business, the beautiful life. But underneath it all was a lie so deep it had been growing roots for years. Her husband Mark wasn't just unfaithful. He was living an entire second life, draining their savings to fund his high school sweetheart's failing diner, while Claire planned dream weddings for strangers. But here's what makes Claire's story different. She didn't just walk away heartbroken. She fought back. She documented every lie, every stolen dollar, every forged signature. She built a case so airtight that the legal system, which Mark thought he could outsmart, locked every door on his double life. And then she took the hardest lesson she'd ever learned and turned it into something that helps other women find their way out of similar darkness. The truth Claire discovered is one we all need to hear: starting over isn't failure. It's freedom. At 38, she lost a marriage, but she gained something far more valuable: herself. If you've ever felt like you were living someone else's version of your life, if you've ever wondered when it's okay to walk away from something you've invested years in, Claire's answer is this: the moment you realize staying costs more than leaving. I hope this story brought you something meaningful today. Maybe it reminded you that it's never too late to choose truth over comfort. That documentation is power. That the life you deserve is worth fighting for. Before you go, please subscribe and hit that like button. These stories matter because you make them matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're strong enough to start over. And remember, at any age, you can sign your own name and have it actually feel like yours.